The Global Child Protection Working Group, the international coordinating body for protecting girls and boys in humanitarian settings, has produced a video series on the minimum standards for child protection in humanitarian action. These minimum standards, also known as the CPMS, were developed through widespread interagency collaboration. They are part of a global humanitarian standards partnership, which includes Sphere, INEE, and others. This video examines Standard 14, Justice for Children. For other installments in the series, please go to the CPWG's website. Children in contact with the justice system are often overlooked in a humanitarian crisis. Standard 14 requires us to modify the ways we have been working and to take specific actions to include them in our response. Standard 14 states, all girls and boys who come into contact with the justice systems as victims, witnesses, or alleged offenders are treated in line with international standards. Child-friendly justice promotes the rights of the child and takes into account his or her individual needs and views. It gives due consideration to the child's maturity and understanding.
People often confuse that justice for children is only to deal with offenders. People have to understand that it's also for victims, it's also for witnesses, and it's even for any children who become beneficiaries in any process in justice system, either formal or informal.
The range of ways that children can come into contact with the justice system may get even larger in a humanitarian situation. For example, Pedro escaped from an armed group and was detained by government forces. Sazan was arrested at the border as she and her family fled their country. Alia was living alone on the streets when widespread fighting broke out. After relocating to a transit center, she has been abused by one of the staff. Lack of identity papers is making it difficult to transfer Hassan to his family in another displaced persons camp. And John is in police custody after being accused of shoplifting in the market following severe floods.
A lot of social structures and justice structures are getting disrupted or even interrupted or destroyed. And so emergencies tend to exacerbate problems that are already there in the country.
The standard provides us with the guidance of what we need to do, of what we need to achieve. It provides guidance on key actions that we need to do during preparedness, response, and after an emergency situation. And it provides us an easy message to advocate on behalf of children in contact with the law.
As a first step after the emergency hits, child protection actors should prioritize children in detention. Map their potential locations, such as police custody, prison, juvenile or women's detention centers, army bases, premises of the intelligence or national security bodies, asylum centers, and law courts. This exercise helped to identify our 5 cases. Let's focus on 2 characters, John and Alia. Alia was separated from her parents when armed conflict broke out. She was rounded up from the streets and placed in a transit center while awaiting family tracing. After some weeks, she disclosed to an NGO social worker that a guard at the center had been beating her and forced her to beg on the streets for him. John's family home was destroyed in the recent floods, and he and his community are facing severe food shortages. His hunger drove him to steal some fruit at a nearby market. The stallkeeper confronted him and beat him harshly. When the police intervened, he was arrested and taken to the station where he languished for several weeks without charges. Children in contact with the law, and especially children in conflict with the law, are often in our blind spot as humanitarians. Armed conflict and disasters can change the relationship between children and the justice system, increasing their victimization and neglect. Therefore, it is important for us to consider them in assessments and program design from the first days of an emergency.
The invisibility is that their rights are not respected, The communities might sometimes look at them as problems because of what they have been involved in and the violence they have met in the communities. And therefore, because of that, it can easily happen that once they are detained by the security forces, really nobody looks for them.
Different actors have different mandates to protect children in contact with the law in a humanitarian setting. These include formal government officials, customary law and community actors, child protection workers, as well as ICRC and specialists from other sectors.
Emergencies create space for so many actors to intervene, and so it becomes crucial to coordinate and work together in order not to duplicate efforts or to even have goals that are a bit contradictory to one another.
It is important to remember that mitigating the risk of children to be in contact with the law is not only the responsibility of agencies working on child protections, those agencies working on health, on education, on income generations can mitigate the risk. Families who receive support for livelihood and support from education sector can mitigate the risk of children going to streets and commit crime or even joining armed forces.
Alia's story provides a clear example of the need to coordinate. After discussing matters with the girl and informing her about her rights and legal options, the NGO worker needed to coordinate with the transit center management, police, prosecution, and health services. Often, we need to involve actors in both the customary and formal justice systems.
We have to work in both in parallel because they are complement each other. We can't work for formal alone or for informal alone. According to us, we have to advocate to implement the juvenile justice system. At the same time, we have to take in consideration the informal or the customary justice that's in place according to the community.
Contact with the law can lead to a range of problems, such as beatings, torture, and sexual assault, prolonged separation from family, hunger and physical hardships, and psychological abuse. An emergency adds stress to the system and increases children's vulnerability, particularly to arbitrary detention. Thus, it is important to act with urgency and to systematically include children in contact with the law in our humanitarian interventions.
Having effective standard operating procedures enables us to quickly induct new people so that they have a reference of what happens, what to do, who to ask for what, and where to go if you are in need of any information. So having the standard operating procedures helps us to coordinate with all the actors and therefore help to quickly resolve issues, because in this kind of context, it might be life-threatening. We really do not have the privilege of time.
Activities should be prioritized according to the girls' and boys' situations and needs. After you have mapped their potential locations, your initial steps might include registering the children and ensuring their status is both clear and understood by the authorities, ensuring their security and safety by monitoring their day-to-day situation, and making sure they have access to basic services. You would follow up with ensuring contact with next of kin, sharing in a child-friendly manner any objective information on what is happening, alerting the different authorities to the children's situation, training officials on the principles of child-friendly justice, and providing psychosocial support.
We try to work on a very important aspect, which is the psychosocial aspect and the psychological component. We do provide these children with psychosocial support sessions through playing and games, and also psychological support on individual basis and also in group therapy.
When the worker documented John's case, he realized that the boy needed a range of help. He ensured that John had access to clean water and food and was in touch with his parents. Throughout it all, he advocated for the boy's release and a speedy settlement of his case without further detention. It is important to build an up-to-date analysis of children's legal situations, such as changes in their legal status, arbitrary detention, length of time and treatment in police custody, access to legal advice, and victims' access to justice. This can be done by pairing the information of individual cases with statistics and other data from all actors.
Data is important for effective and targeted programming, especially in an emergency. We need to have information about children in detention, the number, information about the type of offenses they have committed, and also the information about what services are available for them. For example, availability of a lawyer in a location and access of children to the legal service.
When there is proper preparedness and response, emergencies can actually provide opportunities to strengthen the justice system.
In post-conflict and post-tsunami Aceh, for example, agencies working on child protection facilitate the establishment of specialist unit for child protection at police officers were trained. New procedures in handling children in contact with the law were tested and piloted in many districts. The collaborations between police, prosecutors, judges, as well as social workers were strengthened, ensuring that children are not being stigmatized during the process of handling the cases.
The key actions laid out in Standard 14 can help John, Alia, and children like them because the minimum standards apply across the humanitarian spectrum: protracted crisis, sudden onset conflict or natural disaster, and recovery. They are your first tool for action. Other installments in this series focus on how to use the CPMS and on the specific standards for addressing needs. The CPWG provides support for applying the standards, such as mainstreaming briefs, guidance on contextual adaptation, and training packages. For more information, please go to cpwg.net/minimum-standards.